Reality feels solid, fixed, predictable, but at the deepest level, it may not be what it seems. What if your thoughts are not just passing signals inside your brain, but part of a system that actually shapes what you experience? For decades, this idea was pushed aside as fantasy, not serious, not scientific. But now quantum physics is forcing a second look. At the smallest scale of existence, the rules begin to break. Matter stops behaving like matter. Certainty disappears. And one experiment, simple in design but shocking in result, changed the way scientists understand reality itself. This is not about internet trends or empty motivation. This goes deeper into the foundation of physics, into questions that even top scientists still cannot fully answer. Because when particles behave differently just because they are observed, it creates a problem, a serious one. It suggests that reality is not fully formed until something interacts with it. And that raises a quiet but powerful question. What role does the observer play in all of this? For a long time, the universe was seen as a machine, cold, mechanical, independent of human awareness. Everything followed fixed laws, moving forward like clockwork. Your thoughts did not matter. Your focus did not matter. But quantum physics disrupted that picture. At the quantum level, particles exist as waves of possibility, not fixed objects, not solid things, just probabilities. And only when measured, only when observed, do they settle into a definite state. That shift from possibility to reality is where things become difficult to ignore. This is where the idea of manifestation begins to connect, but not in the way it is often presented, not as wishful thinking, not as effortless attraction, but as a deeper interaction between attention, perception, and the physical world. Because if observation plays a role in shaping outcomes at the smallest level, then the line between mind and matter is not as clear as it once seemed. And that changes the conversation completely. In this video, the focus is on breaking this down in a clear and honest way. No exaggeration, no false promises, just the facts, the theories, and the questions that remain open. You will learn what the double-slit experiment really shows, why scientists still debate its meaning, and how it connects to the idea that awareness might influence reality. You will also see where people get it wrong, where the science ends, and where interpretation begins. Because understanding this properly requires balance. Too much hype, and it becomes misleading. Too much skepticism, and important questions get ignored. There are details here that are rarely explained in a simple way. Small insights that change how everything fits together, like the role of probability in quantum systems, or why observation does not necessarily mean human consciousness, but still leaves room for deeper interpretation. These are the parts that make the topic both fascinating and controversial. And they are the parts that most people never hear about. As this unfolds, the connection between thought, attention, and action becomes clearer, not as magic, not as instant transformation, but as a process, a system where focus influences perception, perception influences decisions, and decisions shape outcome. This is where science and human experience begin to overlap, quietly, subtly, but in a way that is hard to dismiss once seen clearly. The deeper this goes, the more it challenges old assumptions, not by replacing them with blind belief, but by expanding the frame, by showing that reality might be more flexible than it appears on the surface, that what is observed is not always independent of the observer, and that even small shifts in awareness can have real effects over time. By the end of this video, the goal is simple: to give a clearer understanding of what quantum physics actually says, what it does not say, and where the idea of manifestation fits into all of this. Not as a final answer, but as a starting point for thinking differently. Because the truth is, science is still exploring these questions, still uncovering new layers, and the story is far from complete. So stay with this till the end, because the final perspective may change how reality itself is viewed, not in an extreme way, but in a quiet, powerful shift that stays long after the video ends. Welcome to the channel. If this kind of deep thinking and exploration interests you, make sure to subscribe, because the next idea might challenge everything you thought was fixed. The idea sounds simple at first, but it carries weight once it is unpacked properly. Manifestation is not magic. It might be physics, not the exaggerated version seen online, not empty phrases repeated without understanding, but something deeper that sits at the edge of what science is still trying to explain. The point is not to claim that thoughts instantly create reality, but to explore whether there is a connection between awareness and the way reality unfolds. To understand this clearly, the view has to shift away from the visible world and move toward the smallest level of existence, where the rules begin to change and certainty starts to fade. At the quantum level, reality behaves in ways that feel completely unfamiliar. Objects are no longer solid in the way they appear in daily life. Particles, which are supposed to be the building blocks of matter, do not act like tiny hard spheres. Instead, they behave like waves, not fixed points, but spread out patterns of possibility. A particle is not simply in one place at one time. It exists as a range of potential outcomes, a cloud of probabilities that only settles into a definite state under certain conditions. This means that before measurement, before interaction, what exists is not a single reality, but multiple possibilities coexisting at once. That idea alone begins to stretch the limits of how reality is usually understood. This leads to a key principle that sits at the center of quantum mechanics. Nothing is fixed until it is observed. This does not mean that nothing exists, but that what exists is not fully defined. It remains in a state of uncertainty until something interacts with it in a way that forces it to take a specific form. That interaction, often called observation, plays a crucial role in determining the outcome. Without it, the system remains in a fluid state, not locked into a single reality. This is not speculation. It is a consistent result seen in experiments that have been repeated and refined over decades. One of the most famous of these experiments is the double-slit experiment. Its setup is simple, but its implications are profound. A source emits particles, such as photons or electrons, toward a barrier with two narrow openings. Behind that barrier is a screen that records where the particles land. When both slits are open, and no attempt is made to observe which slit the particle passes through, the result is not two clusters on the screen, as would be expected if the particles behaved like solid objects. Instead, a pattern appears that looks like waves interfering with each other. This interference pattern suggests that each particle is somehow passing through both slits at the same time, interfering with itself as a wave would. This result alone challenges the idea of particles as fixed objects, but the experiment becomes even more interesting when observation is introduced. When a detector is placed to observe which slit the particle goes through, the interference pattern disappears. The particles begin to behave like solid objects, forming two distinct clusters on the screen. The wave-like behavior collapses, and the system produces a result that matches classical expectations. The only difference between these two outcomes is the presence of observation. Without observation, the system behaves like a wave of possibilities. With observation, it behaves like a set of definite particles. This leads to a striking statement that has been discussed and debated for years. The act of observation changes reality. The system does not simply reveal a pre-existing state. It appears to be influenced by the process of measurement itself. This does not mean that human thoughts directly control particles, but it raises a deeper question about what observation actually is. Is it the presence of a measuring device, the interaction of particles with other particles, or something more connected to awareness? The experiment does not provide a clear answer, but it opens a space where interpretation becomes necessary. Different interpretations of quantum mechanics attempt to explain this behavior in different ways. Some focus purely on physical interactions, suggesting that observation is simply any interaction that forces a system into a definite state. Others leave room for the idea that consciousness may play a role, that the awareness of an observer is somehow linked to the collapse of possibilities into a single outcome. Not all scientists agree with this view, and many prefer explanations that do not involve consciousness at all. But the fact remains that the question is not fully settled. There is still debate, still uncertainty, still room for exploration. This uncertainty is where the connection to manifestation begins to form, but it has to be handled carefully. If observation affects particles at the smallest level, then it becomes reasonable to ask whether attention, focus, and awareness have a broader influence on how reality is experienced. This does not mean that thinking about something is enough to make it appear. It means that attention may play a role in shaping perception, and perception influences decisions, and decisions influence outcomes. The process is not instant or magical. It is gradual, layered, and deeply connected to how the mind interacts with the world. This is where psychology begins to overlap with physics in a practical way. The brain constantly filters information. It cannot process everything at once, so it selects what to focus on based on patterns, priorities, and beliefs. One system involved in this process is often referred to as the reticular activating system. It acts like a filter, allowing certain information to stand out while ignoring the rest. When attention is focused on a specific goal or idea, the brain becomes more likely to notice opportunities, patterns, and details related to that focus. This does not change reality at the quantum level in a direct sense, but it changes the way reality is experienced and navigated. This shift in perception can lead to real changes over time. When attention is consistent, actions begin to align with that focus. Decisions become more intentional. Effort becomes more directed. The result is not that reality bends instantly, but that outcomes begin to reflect the direction of attention and effort. This is where manifestation moves away from fantasy and becomes a process rooted in awareness and behavior. It is not about sitting still and expecting results without action. It is about aligning thought, attention, and action in a way that creates momentum. Many misunderstand this idea and reduce it to simple thinking exercises. The belief that repeating positive thoughts alone can produce significant change leads to disappointment and confusion. Reality does not respond to thoughts in isolation. It responds to patterns of behavior that are influenced by those thoughts. Action remains essential. Focus without action leads nowhere. Action without focus lacks direction. Both need to work together to produce meaningful results. This balance is often ignored, leading to unrealistic expectations and a misunderstanding of what manifestation actually involves. It is also important to separate the language used in popular discussions from the actual principles involved. Terms like energy, vibration, and frequency are often used loosely, without clear definition. While these terms exist in physics, their meanings are precise and do not directly translate to everyday thoughts and emotions in a simple way. Mixing these ideas without clarity creates confusion. A more grounded approach focuses on what can be observed and understood without stretching concepts beyond their limits. Physics does not replace effort. It explains systems. It provides a framework for understanding how interactions occur at different levels. When applied carefully, it can offer insights into how awareness might influence experience, but it does not remove the need for action, discipline, and persistence. The idea that awareness plays a role does not make the process easier. It makes it more precise. It highlights the importance of attention, the impact of perception, and the value of consistent effort over time. This leads to a practical approach that can be applied without relying on exaggerated claims. The first step is controlling attention. This means becoming aware of where focus is placed throughout the day. Distraction is constant, and without control, attention is pulled in multiple directions. Focusing on specific goals, ideas, or problems creates clarity. It reduces noise and allows patterns to become visible. The second step is being clear about what is wanted. Vague goals produce vague results. Clear goals create a target for attention and action to align with. The third step involves acting in a way that reflects that clarity. Behavior needs to match intention. Small actions taken consistently over time build momentum. Each decision reinforces a pattern, and that pattern shapes outcomes. This is not instant, and it is not always easy, but it is reliable. It turns abstract ideas into concrete results. The final step is maintaining awareness of the process, noticing changes, adjusting strategies, and staying aligned with the original intention keeps the system moving forward. Small shifts in focus can lead to noticeable changes in behavior. Noticing different opportunities, responding differently to challenges, and making more deliberate choices all contribute to a different trajectory over time. The change may not be dramatic at first, but it accumulates. This accumulation is often overlooked because attention is focused on immediate results rather than long-term patterns. But when viewed over a longer period, the impact becomes clear. This approach does not rely on belief alone. It relies on observation, adjustment, and consistency. It does not require accepting every interpretation of quantum mechanics. It only requires recognizing that reality, at its deepest level, is not as fixed as it appears, and that awareness plays a role in how it is experienced. The connection between these ideas is not fully defined, but it is strong enough to explore, strong enough to question old assumptions, and strong enough to influence how attention and action are directed moving forward. The deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to see thoughts as simple reactions. They may feel passive, like background noise that comes and goes without impact. But that view starts to break when attention is examined more closely, because attention directs perception, and perception guides action, and action shapes outcomes. That chain is always active, always running in the background. So maybe your thoughts are not just reactions. Maybe they are part of the system shaping reality, quietly influencing the direction your life moves in, one decision at a time. At the same time, there is still a limit to what is known. Quantum physics opens doors, but it does not give complete answers. It shows patterns that challenge old beliefs, but it also leaves questions that remain unresolved. Some interpretations suggest a deeper role for observation. Others reject that idea and search for purely physical explanations. The truth is still being explored, and that uncertainty is not a weakness. It is a sign that understanding is still evolving. This leaves a space that is both exciting and unsettling. A space where reality is not fully fixed, where outcomes are influenced by interactions, and where awareness may play a role that is not yet fully understood, not in a way that promises instant results, but in a way that highlights how important focus, intention, and action really are. Because even without complete answers, one thing is clear: the way you think changes the way you act, and the way you act changes what you experience. So the real question is not whether manifestation is magic or science. The real question is how much of your reality is shaped by where you place your attention every single day. That is something you can test, something you can observe, something you can change. And maybe, just maybe, this is only the beginning. Maybe the connection between mind and reality is deeper than it appears right now. Or maybe we are still only scratching the surface of how the universe works. If this made you question reality, stay connected, subscribe to the channel, and be part of this journey. Like the video if it made you think differently. Share it with someone who is ready to see the world from a new perspective. Because the next idea might not just inform you, it might completely change how you see everything around you.